So this is my psychology presentation. So there's two definitions for arousal, and arousal is essentially a combination between alertness, awareness, and motivation. So the drive theory states that as arousal levels increase, so do performance levels. And an example of the drive theory in sport would be a football team that is about playing a cup final. So as the arousal builds up before the game and during the start of the game, the performance levels are going to increase. And then there's inverted U theory, which suggests that arousal increases up to a point known as the optimal point, and then when it reaches that, it starts to decrease. So an example in sport would be an NBA player in a basketball game playing well in the first half and reaching their optimum arousal levels, and then in the second half, arousal will become too aroused, and then performance levels start to decrease. And then there's the catastrophe theory, which suggests that arousal reaches a certain point, and then when it reaches that point, performance levels start to drastically decrease. So an example of the catastrophe theory in sport would be a basketball player in a game who's started well, but then becomes too aroused as they've started well, and then when they become too aroused, the performance levels drastically decrease. So the concentrations, so the first concentration is known as broad vision, and is essentially a lack of focus, and linked with an athlete that have low motivation. So an example in sport would be a table tennis player who doesn't want to be playing a game at a certain point, so they'll be lowly motivated and lowly concentrated on the game. And then there's tunnel vision, which is the opposite to broad vision and could be known as being too aroused and too focused. So an example could be a tennis player that is more focused on the ball than their opponent, which could lose them a point. And then the last vision is optimal vision, which can be known as the best type of vision. And an example of optimal vision would be a football player that is dedicated to the sport and knows exactly what they have to do. The three theories of arousal all have differences and similarities. So the first example is that they all suggest that as arousal levels increase, so do performance levels. However, each one states that when arousal gets to a certain point, performance levels either keep going up, drastically decrease, or slowly decrease. Another comparison would be that the inverted U theory suggests that there is an optimal point of arousal, whereas the other two don't. Another comparison would be that the catastrophe theory only applies to individuals that have high cognitive anxiety, whereas the other two can apply to any sport performer. Then another comparison would be that all three theories can be linked within every sport. And the last one would be that the drive theory doesn't suggest that there is a decrease in performance levels no matter how highly aroused you are, whereas the other two say that when you become too aroused, performance levels also decrease. So they're the two definitions for stress, and stress is essentially too much mental and emotional pressure on the mind. So there's two types of stress. There's eustress, which is a good type of stress that's beneficial to an athlete. So for example, if an athlete has poor performance one week, they could go into the game the next week knowing that they've played poor, and they could use that as motivation to play well. Then the opposite to that is distress, which is a bad type of stress that can affect an athlete's performance levels. An example of distress in sport would be a footballer going to take a penalty in the World Cup final, because their stress level would be really high thinking about missing. Then there's the parasympathetic, the symptoms of stress in the body. So there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which relaxes and helps the body stay calm in certain situations. So, for example, a goalkeeper staying calm after conceding a goal in a game. And then there's a sympathetic nervous system, which is basically the fight or flight system. So basically, if there's a situation in a game of football, the individual can either confront the situation head on or leave the situation. And there's four causes of stress. There's internal causes of stress, which build up within the athlete. So, for example, a cricket player could set themselves too high of a stand, and then when they don't reach the stand, they could become stressed. external causes of stress are causes of stress that are uncontrollable for the individual. So, for example, a referee's decision. There's personal stress, which could be caused by things going on at home. So, for example, if a rugby player is having trouble at home, it could be on the mind while performing, which would affect their performance levels. And then occupational, which is stress at work. So, for example, if someone's unsatisfied or unhappy at work, that could be on the mind when performing. And there's also causes of stress in sport. So, if a team starts to lose in football, then the players will start to become stressed because they're going to think they're going to lose. So, there's the two definitions for anxiety. And anxiety is essentially an emotional reaction to a stimulus perceived as dangerous. So there's two types of anxiety. State anxieties are an ever-changing type of anxiety. So in different situations, people are going to have different anxiety levels. And there's trait anxiety, which is essentially a type of anxiety that you were born into the world with. So if a football player is naturally anxious outside of sport, then in sport, say, for when they concede a goal, they're going to be anxious, they're going to think they're going to lose. And there's two symptoms of anxiety. There's cognitive, which is the mental side of it. So examples of cognitive anxiety symptoms could be fear and panic. So if a darts player starts to lose again, then they're going to be fearful that they're going to lose it in the end. And there's also somatic anxiety, which is the physical side of it. So, for example, butterflies and sweating. So, if a footballer is having a bad game, then they're gonna start sweating and have butterflies in the stomach because they might think they're going to get taken off, or they're going to cause the team to lose the game.